We are often led to believe that history is crafted by exceptional intellects and grandiose strategies. While that makes for an appealing narrative, it omits the most entertaining aspect, the absolute nincompoops. This is not merely a compilation of trivial errors. This is a tribute to the 33 most spectacularly inept individuals to have ever held power, whose legendary mistakes highlight that a lofty position combined with a notably low IQ creates a volatile mixture throughout time. First, let's begin with a quietly unfortunate demise. A truly foolish and understated end. Charles Valentine Allen was a French composer from the 19th century and one of the finest piano virtuosos of his era, a competitor to both Chopin and Liszt. So what led this musical giant to his demise? He met it in a blaze of glory crafting a masterpiece. To continue enjoying this content, kindly subscribe to the channel and share your viewing location in the comments. Just kidding. Legend has it that Al-Khan, a devoutly religious man, attempted to reach for a copy of the Talmud perched high on a towering shelf of books. As he pulled the volume, the entire burdensome furniture toppled and crushed him. You would think someone capable of mastering 88 keys with celestial finesse would have a better understanding of basic principles of physics. This was not a dramatic or poetic conclusion. It served merely as a final ironic footnote executed by a piece of furniture. Next. Speaking of individuals who significantly overestimate their own influence, let's discuss Xerxes I, the ruler of Persia. When a fierce tempest wrecked his delicately constructed pontoon bridges across the Hellespont Strait, Xerxes didn't simply become enraged. He became fantastically furious, akin to a biblical scene. He concluded that the sea itself was guilty of insubordination. Therefore, he did what any sane, all-powerful monarch would do: he commanded punishment for the ocean. His soldiers were instructed to strike the water 300 times while hurling insults. They even branded the sea with heated irons. Just imagine being the soldier given that task. It was the ancient world's equivalent of berating a malfunctioning printer, albeit with an entire army and a flair for the dramatic. Unsurprisingly, the sea did not offer a formal apology. Moving on. If challenging the ocean seems foolish, how about prioritizing a chicken over the fate of your empire? Introducing Roman Emperor Honorius. In the year 410 AD, the Goths were assailing the city of Rome, a truly catastrophic incident. A messenger hurried to the emperor, delivering the devastating tidings with the phrase, "Rome has perished." Instead of exhibiting shock or sorrow, Honorius supposedly let out a massive sigh of relief. Why? Because he thought the messenger was referring to his cherished pet chicken, which he had cleverly named Rome. The capital of the Western world was ablaze, and the ruler was primarily worried about the well-being of his poultry. You truly cannot make this up. The empire might be crumbling, yet thank goodness the chicken is still safe. Fourthly, every innovative invention deserves an impressive product demonstration. François Anglais, the creator of roller skates, recognized this. To introduce his invention to the public in the 1760s, he orchestrated a truly spectacular reveal at an elegant masquerade ball in Paris. He donned his innovative skates, picked up his violin to serenade the audience, and rolled gracefully into the room. The crowd gasped in awe. What a genius! What flair! There was just one minor detail he had overlooked during the design phase: a braking mechanism. Anglais, gliding in style while playing music, suddenly realized he had no means to halt his movement. He sped across the ballroom floor and crashed directly into a gigantic mirror, shattering the glass, his violin, and his ego simultaneously. Fifthly, we move on to Ottoman Sultan Ibrahim, a man with the nickname the Mad, which he certainly earned in spectacular fashion. Ibrahim had several peculiar obsessions, including large women and extravagant furs. However, his defining trait was his overwhelming paranoia. One day, he became convinced that someone among his vast harem of 280 concubines had been disloyal. His solution wasn't to conduct an investigation. Instead, he decided upon a complete elimination of the workforce. He commanded that all 280 women be confined in weighted sacks and tossed into the Bosphorus Strait to drown. It's certainly a management approach that is decisive, if nothing else. Forget handling human resources. Ibrahim's strategy was simply to reboot the entire operation by drowning it. Lastly, here's a cautionary tale about unforeseen repercussions, served with a side of rabbit stew. In the year 1859, a British settler in Australia named Thomas Austin found himself feeling a tad homesick. What he longed for the most was hunting, and so he thought it would be a grand idea to import 24 wild European rabbits to his estate to enjoy a little sport. In his own fateful proclamation, he remarked that bringing a few rabbits could hardly cause any trouble. This may just be the most disastrous understatement in the annals of ecological history. Those few rabbits multiplied like well rabbits. Within 5 years, their numbers had skyrocketed to an estimated 600 million, resulting in an environmental catastrophe, eliminating native species and ruining farmland throughout the continent. All this calamity stemmed from one man's desire to hunt something familiar. 7. If you thought that bringing rabbits was unwise, let me introduce you to Eugene Chiffle, a pharmacist hailing from New York and the ultimate fan of Shakespeare. His life's purpose was rather unusual. He aspired to introduce every single bird referenced in the works of William Shakespeare to North America. In the 1,890 seconds after several failed attempts with different species of birds, he released about 60 European starlings into Central Park. Regrettably for North America, the starlings flourished. Presently, their population exceeds 200 million. They are a highly aggressive and destructive, invasive species that pushes out native birds, devastates agriculture, and has even been implicated in the crashing of an aircraft. All this ecological upheaval was not for gain or conquest, but simply because one individual had an immense passion for Shakespeare. 8. Most judicial systems agree that a defendant should likely be alive to stand trial. Pope Stephen V, however, had a different viewpoint. In 897 A.D., he held a grudge against his deceased predecessor, Pope Formosus. Consequently, he orchestrated what is now infamous as the Cadaver Synod. He had the corpse of Formosus, who had been dead for 9 months, exhumed, clothed in full papal attire, and seated on a throne in the courtroom to face accusations. A frightened young deacon was designated to act as the defense attorney for the corpse, compelled to respond to inquiries on behalf of the decaying body. Unsurprisingly, the late pope was found guilty. As punishment, his fingers of blessing were severed, and his body was paraded through the streets before being disposed of in the river. It serves as a striking reminder that even the highest office in the world is not exempt from petty lunacy. 9. If there was ever a historical moment that perfectly captures the phrase "mess around and find out," this is it. In the early 13th century, Genghis Khan, a man you definitely did not want to provoke, sent a diplomatic and trade mission to the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire. The ruler, Shah Muhammad II, had a brilliant idea. Instead of welcoming them, he opted to execute the Mongol ambassadors. Now, there are a few universal rules in diplomacy, and the first rule is you never harm the messenger. The Shah didn't just disregard this rule, he obliterated it. Genghis Khan's reaction was not a strongly worded letter. It was the total and complete destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire. He did not simply conquer it, he wiped it from existence. A brutal lesson on why one should never provoke a hornet's nest. 10. Everyone requires a role model, but it's probably wise to select one within your capabilities. Francisco Solano Lopez, the dictator of Paraguay during the mid-19th century, perceived himself as the Napoleon of South America. Fueled by this grandiose self-concept, he decided to showcase his military prowess by initiating the War of the Triple Alliance. The challenge was that the Triple Alliance included Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. He essentially declared war on his 3 significantly larger neighbors all at once. It was less a masterpiece of strategy and more akin to a national suicide pact. The consequence was one of the most catastrophic wars in modern history, resulting in the deaths of up to 70% of Paraguay's adult male population. He might have imagined himself as Napoleon, yet he ended up being the architect of his nation's demographic disaster. 11. Here's a brief lesson in management courtesy of the Roman Empire. When Emperor Pertinax ascended to power in 193 AD, he inherited a corrupt and undisciplined Praetorian Guard. These were the elite bodyguards of the empire who had just assassinated his predecessor. Pertinax determined that his very first course of action should be to instill discipline and, most crucially, reduce their pay. Let that sink in. His strategy was to reform his own notoriously violent guard by diminishing their financial compensation. It stands as a classic example of fundamentally misjudging the situation. The Praetorian Guard reacted to this remarkable human resources initiative just as one might assume. After a mere 87 days in position, they invaded the palace and assassinated him. It was such a brief reign that he hardly had the chance to settle into the throne. 12. If one cannot earn it, why not simply purchase it? Following the assassination of Pertinax, the Praetorian Guard did something truly astonishing. They placed the Roman Empire up for auction. The wealthiest bidder was an affluent senator known as Didius Julianus. He literally acquired the throne by offering more money to the guards than his competitor. For a fleeting moment, he became the most influential individual in the entire world. The only issue was that he lacked any political backing, had no allegiance from the legions, and the Roman citizens despised him. His rule was a farcical 66 days that concluded when a more capable general, Septimius Severus, advanced on Rome. Julianus was swiftly executed. He learned the difficult lesson that you can buy the title. But genuine power is not something that can be purchased, particularly when the sellers are your only acquaintances. 13. Sultan Murad, the fourth of the Ottoman Empire, was a man of contradictions. He was greatly concerned about maintaining public order and believed that coffee houses were hotbeds for political dissent and insurrection. His answer was a total prohibition on coffee. He was so dedicated to this cause that he would reportedly disguise himself and roam the streets of Istanbul at night. If he found anyone consuming coffee, he would execute them immediately. So what was his chosen beverage as this stern moral overseer? Alcohol. Murad was a well-known heavy drinker. He prohibited the beverage that sparked conversation and intellectual engagement while personally indulging in a drink notorious for inciting chaos and poor decision-making. It's a level of hypocrisy that is truly imperial. 14. If you have ever encountered someone who radiates utter joylessness, they were likely embodying Oliver Cromwell during his tenure as the Lord Protector of England in the 17th century. This puritanical leader determined that enjoyment was the adversary. He waged a full-blown war against happiness. Cromwell and his administration outlawed Christmas celebrations, shuttered all theaters, prohibited most sports, and even restricted makeup usage. He essentially sought to transform an entire nation into a dreary gray waiting room. The English populace detested it so profoundly that after his death and the restoration of the monarchy, they did not simply move forward. They exhumed Cromwell's remains, put his corpse on trial for treason, and executed him posthumously. That's how much they longed for their celebrations. 15. When you're a monarch fleeing for your life amidst a violent revolt, subtlety is essential. This was a lesson French King Louis XVI utterly failed to grasp. While the French Revolution was in full swing, he and his family tried to escape the country. However, they did not do so quietly in the dead of night. No, they commissioned an enormous brand new, exquisitely luxurious and sluggish carriage. To complicate matters further, they did not maintain a low profile on their journey, stopping for extravagant meals and greeting admirers who recognized them. It resembled less of a desperate escape and more of a royal procession. Unsurprisingly, they were easily recognized and apprehended, a blunder that sealed their fate with the guillotine. It was perhaps the most foolish getaway plan in all of history. 16. Occasionally, an individual's nickname conveys everything you need to understand. Meet Ethelred, the Unready, a 10th century monarch of England. Now, unready in this context doesn't imply he misplaced his keys. It's Old English for ill-advised. And indeed, he deserved that moniker. His grand plan for confronting constant Viking invasions was simply to pay them off to depart. This payment was referred to as Danegeld. It worked quite well for a time. The Vikings would accept the substantial bribe and leave. However, they eventually realized something. If they could earn a fortune for nearly invading England, why not return the following year to demand more? Ethelred's approach transformed England into the world's most dependable ATM for raiders, draining his kingdom's resources and guaranteeing that the Vikings would always return. 17. Some individuals leave a significant mark on history. Thomas Midgley Jr. left behind a massive toxic crater. This American chemist likely stands as the single individual who has inflicted the most damage upon the planet. Initially in the 1920 seconds, he created leaded gasoline to prevent car engines from knocking. This action released vast amounts of neurotoxic lead into the atmosphere. Generations of individuals and our environment have been poisoned as a result of his actions. However, that was not the end of his impact. He went on to innovate Freon, the inaugural chlorofluorocarbon that became the preferred refrigerant and aerosol propellant. This singular invention resulted in a significant breach within the Earth's ozone layer. In a final twist of dark irony, he met his demise by becoming ensnared in a series of ropes and pulleys he had constructed to assist him in getting out of bed after contracting polio. He was quite literally undone by the very invention that caused so much harm. The pursuit of everlasting youth has led humanity to embark on some peculiar endeavors. However, Russian physician and revolutionary Alexander Bogdanov escalated this quest to an utterly bizarre and blood-soaked level. He was convinced that he could acquire youthfulness and potentially even immortality through experimental blood transfusions. He established a comprehensive institute devoted to this ambitious vision. In the year 1928, Bogdanov embarked on performing his 12th transfusion on himself. The donor was a student afflicted with both malaria and tuberculosis. Bogdanov, blinded by his own beliefs, found no problem with this situation. The outcome was all too predictable. Soon after infusing himself with the tainted blood, he met a painful end. He was not just mistaken. His relentless pursuit of eternal life directly and foolishly led to his own downfall. If you find blood transfusions for the sake of immortality peculiar, allow me to present the concept of a lemonade ocean. Alfred Brisbane was an ardent follower of the utopian socialist Charles Fourier, a philosopher known for his, shall we say, creative notions. One of Fourier's most renowned predictions was that in a future utopia characterized by perfect social harmony, the salty oceans would transform into a delightful planet-sized glass of lemonade. Brisbane was not merely a passive supporter of this idea, he zealously promoted it. He dedicated a significant portion of his personal wealth and devoted his life to advocating for Fourier's theories, which included the anticipated emergence of the magnificent global lemonade sea. One has to appreciate the optimism, yet one must also question the sanity of a man who awaits the arrival of a citrus-flavored tide. The 14th century Sultan of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, was a man brimming with grand aspirations. Regrettably, all of his ideas were spectacularly misguided. First, he resolved to transfer his empire's capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, a city situated over 1,100 kilometers away. He didn't merely relocate his court. He commanded the entire populace of Delhi to trek there. Many lives were lost along the journey. Following this, he changed his mind and ordered everyone to return. But his brilliance didn't stop there. He commanded the entire populace of Delhi to march towards there. Many perished along the journey. Upon arrival, he had a change of heart and ordered everyone to return. But his brilliance didn't end there. He also introduced a new form of currency, minting copper and brass coins, and asserting that they held the same value as gold and silver. This immediately resulted in rampant counterfeiting. Citizens were literally producing coins in their kitchens, which triggered a full economic collapse. He was a one-man disaster zone of misguided policies. The phrase, "learn from your mistakes," was evidently absent from the lexicon of Arthur III, the Duke of Brittany. Throughout the 100 Years' War, this French nobleman developed an unfortunate knack for being captured by the English. It happened once, and his family paid a staggering ransom for his release. You might think he would exercise greater caution after that incident, but instead he was captured a second time, necessitating another significant ransom payment. At this juncture, any reasonable person would likely steer clear of battles for a spell. Not Arthur, who returned to the fray only to be captured a third time. Each ransom demand drained a fortune. He was less of a warrior and more of a ridiculously priced subscription service for the English army. Being a king typically involves ruling. Yet for Otto I of Bavaria, the role was merely ceremonial, primarily because he was declared legally insane even before he ascended to the throne. Throughout his 27 years of reign in the late 19th century, Otto lived in isolation within a castle under constant medical supervision, entirely oblivious to his royal position. He was neither issuing decrees nor meeting with diplomats. His days were consumed by profound mental illness. His most notable royal activities seemingly involved firing at local peasants with his hunting rifle from castle windows. He was a king in title, only a monarch whose throne remained unoccupied, while he spent his days confined by his own mind and posed a danger to nearby farmers. In the 16th century, the Judgment Emperor of China became fixated on a singular obsession, the desire for immortality. He abandoned his responsibilities as emperor to entirely pursue his desire for immortality, seeking solutions from his court alchemists. These scholars concocted a range of life-prolonging elixirs for him. The main component in numerous magical potions was mercury. The emperor faithfully consumed these mixtures. convinced they were cleansing his body and guiding him to eternal life. Instead, as contemporary science would have enlightened him, he was merely and gradually poisoning himself with a toxic heavy metal. In a twist of fate that should have been expected by everyone, the Emperor's potion for immortality ultimately led to his demise. A classic instance of a remedy being far worse than the ailment. 24. Mithridates VI of Pontus was the most paranoid sovereign of the ancient era. His utmost anxiety was being assassinated through poison. To counter this fear, he created a detailed routine of consuming minuscule, non-lethal quantities of every known poison, aiming to develop complete immunity. For years, he turned into his own walking laboratory for toxicology. And in a peculiar way, it actually worked. When the Romans eventually defeated him in combat, he opted for suicide rather than being captured. He reached for his reliable vial of poison, the one weapon he believed he was immune to, and ingested it. Nothing occurred. His lifelong obsession with paranoia had been so effective that he could literally not poison himself. In a frustrating twist of fate, he had to command one of his own guards to finish him off with a sword. 25. Leaders commonly depend on advisors, intelligence briefings, or strategic assessments to make crucial choices. However, a particular king of Cambodia from the 19th century relied on his dreams. As per historical records, this ruler experienced an exceptionally vivid nightmare, one night in which he witnessed his entire navy being completely annihilated. Instead of awakening and dismissing it as just a bad dream, he interpreted it as a divine message. The very next day, he issued a shocking directive: dismantle the entire Cambodian fleet. Just like that, spurred by a single unsettling dream, the nation's naval defense vanished. It's a diplomatic decision-making process that makes flipping a coin appear to be a sophisticated tactical maneuver. One can only speculate what might have transpired had he dreamt his palace was constructed of cheese. 26. Most monarchs gather art, land, or titles. King Farouk of Egypt, however, collected items he filched. He was a kleptomaniac on a global scale. This was not a secret habit. It was a widely recognized aspect of his personality. He would swipe everything from ceremonial swords to random knickknacks from his hosts and fellow dignitaries. His most audacious and notorious theft occurred during a meeting with Winston Churchill. While the British Prime Minister was momentarily distracted, King Farouk managed to pilfer his treasured pocket watch right from his vest. Churchill, a man not easily flustered, eventually realized what had transpired and had to diplomatically insist on its return. It's one thing to be a king, but it's an entirely different level of boldness to be a king who is also a common pickpocket. 27. Writing can serve as a powerful instrument for articulating ideas. For the 17th century English politician Algernon Sidney, it became a self-signed death sentence. Sidney was a fervent Republican who opposed the concept of absolute monarchy. He documented his political theories in a manuscript entitled Discourses Concerning Government, asserting that monarchs did not possess a divine right to rule and that citizens were entitled to resist tyranny. The issue was that he never made it public. When he was accused of treason, government officials searched his residence, discovered the unpublished manuscript, and utilized his own private writings as the principal evidence against him during his trial. He was convicted and executed based on the very words he had penned for himself. He essentially wrote his path to the gallows. 28. When your nation is caught up in the greatest war in human history, you require your most capable individuals leading the military. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia chose a different approach. In the midst of World War I, while Russia faced devastating losses, he made the disastrous decision to dismiss the skilled commander-in-chief of the army and assume personal command himself. The only trouble was that he had absolutely no military training or experience. This decision was catastrophic. It resulted in every subsequent military failure. Each setback and every life lost was now closely and personally linked to him. This choice not only threatened the campaign, but also raised serious concerns. It completely damaged his reputation, ignited public outrage, and significantly sped up the onset of the Russian Revolution, which would finally lead to his downfall, along with that of his entire family. 19. During the early 15th century, China commanded the most formidable and sophisticated naval fleet in existence worldwide. The fabled treasure fleet under the leadership of Admiral Hai was made up of enormous ships that overshadowed anything found in Europe. They ventured into the Indian Ocean, reached the shores of Africa and Arabia, and asserted a dominant Chinese influence across the oceans. However, the emperor later deemed this endeavor a misuse of funds. In a surprising turn of events, the leadership of the Ming dynasty proclaimed that foreign exploration was not needed. They commanded the entire treasure fleet to be obliterated, set ablaze, and left to decay. China turned its focus inward, embracing a policy of isolationism that would endure for centuries. They possessed the world at their fingertips and simply chose to discard it all. This decision irrevocably altered the trajectory of global history. 30. Pánalo de Narváez was a Spanish conquistador who led what might be considered the most disastrous expedition in the annals of the Americas. In 1528, he arrived in Florida with roughly 400 men and a fleet of vessels. His first act of sheer brilliance was to divide his forces. He dispatched the ships to sail along the coast to rendezvous later while he led his men on a grueling journey through the dense, hostile, and entirely unfamiliar swamps of Florida. Surprise, surprise. The ships and the land party ultimately failed to reunite. Narváez's men faced starvation, disease, and relentless assaults from indigenous tribes. In desperation, they resorted to constructing makeshift rafts in an attempt to sail to Mexico. Out of the original 400 men who made landfall, a mere 4 managed to survive the grueling ordeal. It was a masterclass in the wrong way to explore. 31. Occasionally, a person's last words serve as an eloquent encapsulation of their life. Other times, they illustrate a monumental misjudgment. General John Sedgwick was a well-respected commander of the Union during the American Civil War. At the Battle of Spenia, in 1864, he was overseeing his troops when he noticed some of them ducking to evade sniper fire from a great distance. Frustrated by their perceived cowardice, Sedgwick stood tall and reprimanded them with the now infamous last words. They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. Just a moment later, a bullet from a Confederate sniper struck him just below the left eye, resulting in his immediate death. It was a tragic, ironic, and ruthlessly effective reminder of the dangers of underestimating one's adversary, delivered at a speed of over 800 meters per second. 32. Here we encounter a story that balances precariously between folly and brilliance. Spiriton Louis was a humble Greek water carrier who rose to national hero status after clinching victory in the inaugural Olympic marathon at the 1896 Athens Games. His triumph was a moment of immense national pride for Greece. Following the race, the King of Greece was so ecstatic that he offered to grant Louis any wish he might have. He could have requested riches, land, a government position, anything his heart desired. Instead, Louis, being a sensible man, paused for a moment before asking for a new donkey and cart to assist him in his work as a water carrier. He was presented with the world, but opted to enhance his working vehicle instead. Was this a foolish rejection of wealth or a wise choice to remain grounded in his humble beginnings? History continues to debate this. 33. In 1867, the Russian Empire determined it was time for a significant reassessment of its possessions. One of its least profitable and most challenging territories was Alaska, a vast, remote, and seemingly worthless stretch of ice and stone, believing it to be nothing more than a frigid wasteland. Tsar Alexander II sold the entire region to the United States for $7.2 million. This approximates to around 2 cents per acre. At the time, Americans derisively referred to the purchase as Seward's folly, believing their government had acquired a massive icebox. Yet, just a few decades later, substantial deposits of gold were uncovered, followed by one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Russia, in a moment of staggering short-sightedness, relinquished a territory rich with untold natural wealth for the paltry sum akin to that of a minor royal wedding. 33 instances of magnificent world-altering incompetence. However, we understand that the Hall of Shame is extensive and the competition is fierce. So who is the one unforgivable exclusion from this list? Whose grand display of foolishness did we mistakenly ignore? And what justifies their position as 34th? Present your argument in the comments section below. Is it a political figure, a military leader, or an influential entrepreneur? Share your nomination along with your reasoning in the comments. If you found this examination of poor choices intriguing, be sure to deliver your judgment on it. Hit the like button, share this debacle with your most logical friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to catch the next episodes. We appreciate your viewership and see you again soon with more astonishing topics.